the key to bold flavors and perfect texture in this vegetarian lasagna? A 10-minute microwave trick for the eggplant, and several other secrets. Stay tuned because I'll walk you through every step of my favorite comfort food vegetarian lasagna recipe. It can go toe-to-toe with the goat lasagna at the bolognese, and I promise there will be no soggy or bland bites. Even meat eaters will be asking for seconds, so let's get cooking.
Wow. I absolutely love the beautiful colors when cooking with fresh veggies. It's amazing. Anyways, this recipe starts with about 2 cups of my first true love, freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano, 1 cup of heavy cream, a nice sized eggplant, 1 cup of whole milk cottage cheese, roughly a pound of zucchini, and about 12 ounces of baby spinach, roughly a pound of yellow summer squash, half a cup of Kalamata olives, pretty much a whole head of garlic cloves, 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes, a bunch of fresh basil, and around 3 cups of freshly grated whole milk mozzarella. This recipe is going to take a ton of prep work, so make sure you set aside a good chunk of time to prep. Maybe it's just me, but the prep part of cooking is something I honestly crave sometimes. The first bit of prep is to peel and dice the eggplant into roughly half-inch cubes. I love these Y-shaped peelers over the vertical peelers. I find I can get a much better grip on them, which allows me to work much more quickly. After a long work week and being worn out from chasing my 2 and 5-year-olds around the house all week, sometimes it's nice to just block a couple hours off on Saturday morning and cook an amazing meal from scratch. It helps me decompress. Eggplant, or melanzana as your Sicilian nonna would call it, is a versatile vegetable used all the time in classic Sicilian cooking. Growing up in my house, my mother and brother were vegetarians, and almost everything I learned about cooking comes from watching and helping my mom prepare amazingly beautiful and delicious vegetarian food. My mom's eggplant parmigiana is one of my absolute favorite dishes of all time to this day. It's so good that now she usually makes 2 batches so my brother and I can take some home. Put the half-inch cubed eggplant into a bowl and toss the cubes with 1 teaspoon of salt and toss to combine. The first trick I'm going to teach you will help avoid a watery lasagna mess at the end, so line a plate with paper towels and add the cubes of salted eggplant, working in separate batches if you need to. I want you to microwave the eggplant for up to 10 minutes, turning them over after about halfway. You'll know when they're done because the eggplant will dry out and start to shrivel a little bit. I learned this trick from one of my favorite teachers of all things kitchen hacks, America's Test Kitchen. As a home chef with a great foundation I learned from my mom, America's Test Kitchen has enabled me to confidently take risks in the kitchen and learn so much more about new techniques. While the eggplant is microwaving, it's time to prep our zucchini and squash. Similar to the eggplant, I want you to evenly chop the zucchini and squash into roughly half-inch dices. I love this recipe for so many reasons, and it really represents who I am as a person and a home chef quite well. Growing up in my mom's kitchen, I learned early on in life to cook with whole foods both to nourish your body and your mind. But for me, it's not just about the health benefit of eating minimally processed ingredients, which is huge on its own. It's also about the time we take to prepare and honor the ingredients we cook with, and take the time to break bread with those we love most in this world. The concept of cooking a meal from scratch within the home is quickly becoming a lost art because we live in an era of fast foods where people treat mealtime as a chore or a nuisance or something that they no longer have time for. It's rare these days for people to sit at a table together, talk to each other, and break bread made by the hands of someone they love. And I'm honestly terrified my son and daughter are going to grow up in an age where the norm is to grab something on the go, packed with ultra-processed ingredients made in a lab, and then sit down at a table full of people with their headphones who are texting each other or just playing mind-numbing Candy Crush on their VR goggles. On to the next phase of prep, where I want you to finely mince your fresh garlic cloves and a quarter of the fresh bunch of basil. I never use processed garlic and always opt for fresh cloves instead. I actually made this lasagna for my vegetarian mom on my dad's birthday dinner. Lasagna bolognese for dad, the vegetarian lasagna for mom. Because I had to make a lasagna bolognese and prep these vegetables, which takes a lot of time, I needed to find ways to cut down on cooking time for the sauce components of the vegetarian lasagna. So I've used my immersion blender here to crush up 28 ounces of whole San Marzano tomatoes, another star of Sicilian cooking. I always buy whole San Marzano tomatoes whenever possible. This tomato sauce doesn't need to be cooked at all, and I want you to add a quarter of the minced garlic and a quarter of the freshly chopped basil, a teaspoon of salt, and a quarter teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes to the sauce to help build the flavors. The eggplant is ripping hot with steam and basically done now. It took around 10 minutes, but you can see it has started to brown and dry out a lot, which is exactly what we need to do to draw moisture out. I will probably get skewered by traditional Italian cooking aficionados here, but trust me, this works well. The second no-cook sauce we're going to make is so easy and a more flavorful, less watery substitute than using just ricotta cheese, which you'll often find in lasagna recipes. This no-cook cream sauce will also help add some sturdiness to the lasagna and prevent moisture from leaking out in the end. I want you to combine the cup of heavy cream, the cup of whole milk cottage cheese, some salt, pepper, and a teaspoon of cornstarch in a bowl. Then whisk all of those ingredients together and add 2 cups of freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano to add depth and complexity to this no-cook cream sauce. I will never use the imposter Parmesan when cooking and always spring for the real authentic Parmigiano Reggiano, which is required by Italian law to be made in the Emilia-Romagna region and aged for a minimum amount of time, creating the best version of Parmigiana. The pre-grated imposter Parmesan is a false prophet who can never be trusted. Although the prep part of this recipe takes a long time, we just made 2 no-cook sauces in like 10 minutes, so now it's time to check back in on the veggies. Combine all of the nuked eggplant in a large bowl with the chopped zucchini and squash and set it aside. To ratchet up the flavor of the lasagna filling, I'm going to make an Italian-inspired chimichurri sauce by combining the rest of the minced garlic, basil, chives, some dried thyme, and dicing that mixture up before adding it to a couple tablespoons of oil, salt, and pepper. Set this aside and let the flavors meld into that olive oil. Remember, the fats, in this case from the oil, are always the vessel to Guy Fieri's Flavor Town. Working in 2, maybe 3 batches depending on the size of your pan, add the eggplant and zucchini mixture to a pan to brown with a couple more dashes of olive oil and season as you go. While this mixture is cooking, our last bit of prep is to roughly chop a handful of Kalamata olives. I know a lot of people who really don't like olives, and I might lose them here, but I love adding these flavor bomb Kalamatas to many dishes and can't get enough of them. I think my love for olives began when I was 12 years old living in Florence, Italy for the year with my family. Olives have such a strong presence and meaningful history in Italian culture, going hand in hand with ancient Greek and Roman power dynamics. One could argue that the olive plant is the most influential plant to exist, with its iconic symbol popping up everywhere. See if you can find it next time you look at a $1 bill. After the vegetables have browned, add half of the Italian chimichurri mixture to the pan and quickly stir everything to combine. You don't want the garlic to burn, so as soon as you smell it, transfer the veggies to a bowl as quickly as 30 seconds. Repeat that same process with the second batch of veggies and set those flavor-packed veggies to the side. We're going to finish our last bit of sautéing by adding all 12 cups of fresh spinach to the pan. I'm always amazed by how much spinach cooks down. We want to draw out as much moisture as possible from the leaves, which will take a couple minutes, and after the spinach are wilt chamberlain, let them dry off on some paper towels to absorb even more moisture. Okay, I promise all of that prep and sautéing, essentially pre-cooking the veggies to draw out as much moisture as possible, will be worth it in the end. Combine the Italian chimichurri veggies with the spinach into one bowl and mix them thoroughly. And now onto my favorite part, the piece de resistance of any lasagna recipe, the assembly. Preheat the oven to 400 degrees while you're assembling, spray the bottom of your baking dish with nonstick spray, and evenly distribute 1 cup of the no-cook tomato sauce for your base. Now layer the base with 4 pieces of these no-boil lasagna noodles. When I first started making lasagna, I used to boil the noodles with the ridges in the water first, and it would become a sloppy mess. Then I tried making my own noodles, which is amazing, but also extremely time-consuming, and can be error-prone. So a couple years ago, thanks to America's Test Kitchen, I started using these no-boil lasagna noodles, and I was blown away at how easy and better the lasagnas turned out. These no-boil noodles are thinner, and after they absorb the sauce, they taste perfectly al dente, very close to freshly made pasta. A win-win. With the rubber spatula as my paintbrush, I'm adding a nice healthy layer using half my Italian chimichurri veggies and Kalamata olives, while channeling one of my favorite impressionist painters, Claude Monet, perfectly layering the lasagna with vibrant pops of color. Next up, half of our no-cook cream sauce dolloped on in perfectly portioned spoonfuls, and back to the paintbrush to gently use quick and short brush strokes, blending the colors and flavors of the lasagna. Voila! I call this one Italian Alpine Daffodils. The no-cook cream sauce with cottage cheese, cream, and addictive umami bomb morsels of Parmigiano Reggiano is going to add depth and creaminess to every bite. But I want this to be the ultimate vegetarian comfort food, akin to the level of lasagna bolognese, so I'm adding a layer of freshly grated whole milk mozzarella. I always opt to freshly grate my cheeses instead of buying pre-grated cheese, mainly for the superior taste, but also because the meltability is far better without those nasty anti-clumping preservatives added to pre-shredded cheeses. After our cheese layers, let's start with a fresh canvas, because, painters like to tweak and iterate. So another layer of 4 no-boil lasagna noodles, and repeat with a cup of tomato sauce, the second half of chimichurri veg, the remaining no-cook cream sauce, and mozzarella cheese. Unlike the lasagna bolognese, which I like to make with as many layers as humanly possible, for this veggie lasagna there will only be 2 hearty layers of filling for a meatier texture, topping the noodles off with the remaining tomato sauce and shredded mozzarella. I call this one Inverted Italian Alpine Sunset. Now you can make this a day ahead of time, so you can just cover the lasagna and stick it in the fridge until you're ready to bake. And when you're ready to bake it, cover the top of the lasagna with a non-stick sprayed layer of foil or plastic wrap and pop it in the oven for 30 to 40 minutes at 400 degrees. I call this one the Italian flag on acid. After baking the lasagna for 30 to 40 minutes, it's done, and you can remove it to let the lasagna rest and cool down before slicing into it. This resting step will help with solidifying the lasagna and make cutting it much easier. Look at how well it holds up. No soggy, no watery mess here. I made lasagna bolognese for my dad for his birthday this year, and it's still my favorite type of lasagna. But since my mom's a vegetarian, I had to serve her a worthy vegetarian lasagna for her when they came over. I owe so much in my life to my mother, so I couldn't dare serve her a watery, soggy, bland vegetable lasagna. I hope you learned something in this video, and don't shy away from trying something new. As always, I believe if you embrace slow foods, discover new flavors, and cook with love for those you love most in this world, you can change your life.